Live stream, got it. Man, technology is wild. So we're on Zoom, but we're also going to be on YouTube. Apparently you can do like Facebook and all the other things too.
Facebook Live.
Mm-hmm.
Now TikTok has a live option as well. So
I gotta turn I can hear myself on YouTube, so I gotta turn that off. All right, I think we're set up. Let's hope for the best. I think as long as we have a recording on Zoom, then we're okay. I can always just upload it to YouTube as well. All right, so we're here. So excited to get this meeting going, this talk going. All right, so brief introductions and then we're going to jump right in, right?
Okay.
All right. All right, so I'm Michelle Wilshire, Dr. Michelle Wilshire, licensed clinical psychologist, licensed in both New York and Florida, and the founder of Wasabi and Well. Joining me today for today's talk is Lovely. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Lovely Dorleans, and I am a registered mental health counselor intern in the state of Florida.
All right, welcome. Welcome, Lovely. So excited to have you, and a little bit more about Lovely that also makes this talk interesting. What are you going to be doing next, Lovely? What's the plan very soon?
In the near future, I will be joining the Wasabi and Well family. Very exciting.
Foundational. This is foundational for Wasabi and Well as we are slowly and humbly growing so that we can reach our communities, Black and Brown communities, and make mental health, healing, wellness, more joy in our lives to make it all more accessible. And so today's talk is also about that. It's this topic today, it's a hot topic. When Lovely presented this topic as an interest of hers, I was instantly hooked. One, because it's a hot topic, but also anything to do with Black wellness. I'm game, I'm ready for it. I'm all about it at this point. And I also had a hunch that we have differing views, which I love that. I think that it makes it more interesting. It's intellectually stimulating to debate a little bit. And it's better for people who are viewing this, who are considering either working with us or thinking about themselves in this way. So jumping right in then, what are we talking about today? What is the topic?
Today's topic is the imposter phenomenon. Not sure how many people are familiar with it, but it's described as a high achieving person who struggles to internalize their own successes. But to put it more simply, it's kind of someone who doesn't realize they are as good or great as they are, despite like there being like facts and proof. Like, for example, you're working as a CEO of a company, but in your mind, you may feel like, well, I'm not even that great. I don't see why people feel like I am as great as I am. I think I was just lucky enough to get to this spot. So that's, just one example of what imposter phenomenon typically looks like. Some would say it's like just regular low self-esteem, but I feel like it's a bit different than that, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. So tell us more on that. Like you said, it's a bit more than just low self-esteem. Can you elaborate on that part?
I feel like it's deeper than just run-of-the-mill low self-esteem. I don't know. It just feels like more far-reaching, for example. I feel like, especially because of the communities that it typically impacts, the Black and Brown communities, especially the women in those Black and Brown communities.
Okay. All right. So the impact is a bit different than, and maybe even like the approach of when we're working with someone in that sense.
Yeah.
All right. So you call it, so the phrase is that you're using imposter phenomenon. Is that the same as imposter syndrome, which is what the hashtags are and the trending topic is? Is it the same or is it different?
That's that's actually a wonderful question because when I was initially introduced to the topic, I had heard imposter syndrome, but then in doing my research, when I had to write about it, I would see kind of interchanging between imposter syndrome and phenomenon. But a bulk of the research that I read always used imposter phenomenon or IP for short, which is why I
Mm.
typically just tend to call it that. I really can't say where the syndrome aspect came from. I haven't seen that in any research. I always see IP.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you're bringing the what I'm thinking is probably the more accurate terminology, because when we hear syndrome, then we're probably expecting to see it in the DSM, and this does not exist in the DSM.
Not
So
quite.
calling it more of a phenomenon, that it's something that may be more of a recent uptick
Mhm.
in this experience. It could also be that people are talking about it more and it's always existed, but you weren't allowed to talk about it. So and sometimes they can't tell, they can't differentiate between the two. But phenomenon, I think, makes definitely a lot more sense when we really consider what it is.
Yeah, and so with IP and people who experience those imposter feelings, a lot of times they kind of feel like unworthy of like the praises that they get for the wonderful work that they do, especially as it relates in like a career setting. But this can also like move into like the academic space as well. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of them feel unworthy of the praise that they receive for the achievements. And a lot of times, like I had said earlier, they will like use like things outside of their control as an explanation as to why they have become so successful. So, oh, I'm just lucky, or no, it was just perfect timing, things like that. Kind of always downplaying their success.
Right. Downplaying their success. Okay. Yeah. Have now, when we have some of these talks,
Mhm.
sometimes if you're comfortable, you're I always invite a speaker to talk about themselves, if you would like a time when you have downplayed, your skills and your capabilities. Has it ever been something that you've experienced?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I think that that creates a perfect segue into the next question about what interested me in this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I was introduced to it when I entered into my grad program 2 years ago. A professor was just casually talking about us selecting like our topics for research because we would have a paper due at the end of our program. And I don't know what made her casually mention imposter syndrome or phenomenon. I was like, interesting, I've never heard of that before. So I went home and I looked it up. I was like, they're talking about me in this research because it was very loud. And I realized like, wow, because I just attributed it to maybe me just being like not as confident, but it's very much in the academic space. I would say that I struggled with IP so much so that I almost felt like, I didn't need to be in the grad program that I was in because I did a lot of that too. Like people were like, oh my God, you got into grad school. And I'm like, no, I was just lucky, or it was just the timing, or it was just an
Mm-hmm.
easy program to get into, or they just had a quota to me. I would do that to myself. And so I guess that is why I am so interested in it because I'm like, okay, so this is what I've been experiencing, even though there's clearly proof that I am, smart enough to hang with the best of the best. I never felt that way. And I would say, after leaving that academic space and then coming into that now working in a clinical setting, it was definitely something that impacted me when I first became a therapist. And I would say now, I've gotten, more control over it, especially after reading more of this research. But man, I think people don't really understand like just how much this can really impact you. It's like everyone is telling me all these wonderful things about me, but I don't agree. And I just feel like it was luck that got me everywhere that I've been.
Right. And so, that makes me think of when, well, first, thank you for sharing that insight. That really helps, one, for people to connect. For myself, I've experienced this feeling as well, right? That like I'm not good enough, I don't need to be here, whether it's academically or in other settings that I've been in. So it's really important for us to maintain our humanness in these kind of conversations. Um, but but yeah, so it just makes me think of how many times we've probably all experienced it, where we've told someone, oh my goodness, you're this, you're that, all of, and you just expect people to hear it, take it, absorb it, and you run with it.
Mhm.
And no matter, like you said, no matter what you do or say, it's not penetrating. It just
Yes.
doesn't absorb. Right. Do you have either an opinion or insight of what is the block, right? Like what, and I bet everyone's different when you're really thinking about it, but like, what is one blocker to absorbing this insight about yourself and knowing that you are skilled enough?
For me, I guess it was, me not believing, what people had to say about me and, my intellectual abilities. But
Mhm.
I guess for me, it was like, well, what if they're only saying that? What if that's not really true? What if they're just trying to be nice? What if they're just not trying to hurt my feelings? But even
Mm,
more so, what if I can't keep up this facade? And so when I say facade, like this, okay, I was able to get into this grad program. What if the dean realizes, yeah, no, she's not as smart as we thought she is. Let's kick her out. Or like even, working as a therapist, what if the clients are able to sense that I am not as confident in what I'm saying or how I'm able to help them, and then I get fired. Like it's that for me. I wish that I had a stronger answer. It's still something that I process every day and really trying to figure out like what is the root of this.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so what I hear with that is it's complicated.
Very.
And so much so is, which is why it's a great topic if you decide to, you meaning just anyone, to go on a therapeutic journey with a professional, because you're too close to it, right? Most of the time, we're sometimes too close to a problem or a challenge in life. And so we need someone else who can take a step back and start to parse through all those details. But it's a complicated experience to have as a human. So on to the next question around
Mhm.
othering, right? So other is something that I know we study in school and we sometimes have big conversations about it.
Mhm.
It's a bit of a nested topic. It's not like you don't go to a class that's called othering usually.
Yes.
Um, but something that we're familiar with. First, can you tell us a bit more about what is othering, and then in what role does it play in IP?
So othering, when I was introduced to the topic when I was doing all this research about IP,
Mhm.
essentially it sounds like what anyone who is not like the majority is referred to as. So like if we use the example of gender, as many of us may know, men are the majority. They're they are who things are done for, and we are just like an afterthought, we as women. So the same things can possibly be attributed to, it in a looking from a racial standpoint. White people are viewed as the majority, and those of us who are Black and brown are usually viewed as the other, the afterthought. We are not what everything in the world is designed for, if that makes sense.
Love it. Love that explanation. Because to your point, you're not talking about numbers per se,
Mhm.
right? Because globally, Black and brown is, way more in numbers.
Absolutely.
But in this country, at least when we're kind of hyper focusing here,
Mhm.
um, whether it's the numbers but more importantly, othering is about the focus. Who do you make a product for? Such a good way of explaining it.
Mhm.
Research, like a lot of medical research. Who is it done for? Who is it?
Based
The
on.
right, exactly. And then who is it marketed to? Right.
Margaret.
So yeah, so that is othering. So talk a bit more about othering in imposter syndrome and like how those two go together.
So with othering, if I'm remembering correctly, it societal norms and expectations predicate who is made to feel more powerful versus
Mhm.
who is to assume that place of inferiority. And
Mhm.
so bringing it back to our conversation, if we're looking at it from a racial standpoint, we are the ones who are made to feel inferior Black and brown people in general, but in this conversation specifically, Black and brown women.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that, being made to feel like you're the other, you are not who this world is designed for, it can encourage those imposter feelings. And then we are in this space to where it's impacting our self-esteem, psychological distress, etc.
Right. Yeah. So then to piggyback off of that, right? Like talking about going into a new role. I think that's one of the examples that gets used quite often. You get hired just as you're going to be coming into a new role. And that could be a moment of like a spike, right? Regardless of who you're surrounded by, which is all Black women. But the othering piece still sticks. And day to day living in the circumstance of being seen as less than, or like you said, inferior. So it doesn't just go away. I think that's like the point. It's not like a light switch where you could like, you turn the light on and off. Like that is not how feelings and emotions work. And I know that can be really hard to kind of get across generally to people. But so yeah, this is why it's a really important topic though, because it's a process to understand it. And I'm so glad that you're here interested in talking more about it, not just as someone who's experienced it, but also how it's impacting people way beyond yourself. Like it's critical.
I know earlier you had asked, like, how did it impact me? Like, what is so interesting? And sitting here as you're speaking, I'm thinking about it. And I suppose for me, in my mind, I'm like, if I humble myself, then it won't hurt so much if I find myself in a situation where someone else feels the need to humble me or make me or remind me, well, hey, you're not as smart as you think you are. You're not as good as you think you are. So it's kind of like, let me just do it for myself before I find myself in a space where it's being done to me. Yes.
Would you say then it's kind of like a defense mechanism?
Yes. I
Some
guess to call it a defense mechanism.
Right. Maybe like a cousin of, but but something similar. Yeah. Okay. And I could totally see that, like not getting yourself too hyped up inside just in case the bad thing happens, a bad thing happens. Yes. And I mean, just being very going all out because, well, you're still getting to know me. I'm a little bit wild, but but just like I think about a role that I had. I'm a bit of a techie myself, so not just a therapist, but also coding and designing. And I worked in a space. It still bothers me to today, talking about the bad thing happening. Like one day I showed up at work and already feeling the way I'm feeling inside because I'm looking around, looking left and right. I'm in most cases the only female in the space. And I'm not the only Black person in the space, but I felt like I was still on my own. Had to hold my own because of who I was around. And then I come in one day feeling extra cute, and I had my head wrap on, cute one, like not just like a bonnet to go to sleep. I'm talking about like,
head wrap,
going out, right? And then I step off the elevator. This is 9 a.m. or whatever it is. 2 seconds off the elevator. Hey, good morning, Aunt Jemima. I almost fell back down the elevator. Like I'm laughing about it now because it's been a minute, but I was floored, right? And so to me, that's an example of the bad thing happening. That finally you feel good about yourself.
Yes.
And you're looking cute, and and I was. There's no denying that I was looking cute that day, but it was totally unnecessary, and it almost feels like it was an attack. And the conspiracy theorist in me is like, I feel like the dominant culture knows that this is what they can do to you.
Yes, I do agree.
Like maybe they don't always know it. Like it's not to the surface, or in the forefront of their mind, but that because there's a certain level of power and control that exists
Mm-hmm.
at different layers, then they can exert themselves this way
Yes.
and
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 I
then
guess,
walk away. Mm-hmm.
and I suppose similar to what you said, I guess I just was wanting to do it to myself before the dominant culture would do it to me. So,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And so then that makes me think of, like, for me before my locks, like all the years of, I mean, on one hand, it felt like it was easier not to have my natural hair,
mhm.
but that's not necessarily the case either. But just staying under the radar, being the having that feeling of wanting to stay under the radar. So the head wrap very much was like, I'm not going to stay under the radar, right?
And
Forget it.
did that impact you wearing head wraps there moving forward?
It did a little bit, actually, because I was so exhausted by that was just one example. Like, there were so many more examples of comments and things that were said. Uh so I had worn that head wrap despite all those other comments that I'd heard even before that. And yeah, I just think that, granted, it didn't stop me from even getting the job. I had curly hair, crochet
Mhm.
before the locks. So it didn't stop me from doing things like that per se, but even those hairstyles made what was the butt of the joke at times, right? So uh yeah, to this entire topic just being about being othered, being cast off as someone different.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Whew. Just
I know.
I can only imagine how you felt in that moment.
uh, and if it's like, I can be spicy, which I was. That's the thing. I had my reactions to it that I could still be open with,
Mhm.
but it there's no winning in the dynamic that I was in. There was
Yes.
just no winning.
Yes.
You know who,
Like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
right? Because who has the real power? I definitely didn't. So uh yeah, so this is good. I'm so excited that we're able to have these conversations, because it's important for what whoever's listening and potential clients to know that we are real people and we're not mind readers. There's a post that I saw earlier, like, no, I'm not reading your mind. And it's like, no,
Yes.
we're not doing that. We're not necessarily working when we're off duty. But what's more important really is that we can connect to some of the challenges that you're experiencing,
Yeah.
because we've been through it and we've navigated it and we're still here. So that within itself is a success.
Yes, I definitely know in other conversations about this research, I do my best to self-disclose and let everyone know, like, hey, I like researching this topic and I'm also someone who struggles with this. So
Mhm.
it just kind of makes me more human, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And therefore more relatable. Like, I think that's like the overarching idea, is that we're, just being relatable people.
Mhm.
So I was also then curious, um, if you if we were kind of set up a scenario here where you were to get a new client, like in a couple of weeks, you're gonna be onboarded and working with us, and I'm so excited about having you on board. And in no time, I guarantee you're going to have a client that is struggling with similar issues that we're talking about today, especially because most of of Wasabi and Well is made up of professional Black women.
Mhm.
And um, so I'm curious, what is a couple of ways that you would approach this client in order to support and help them through this challenge?
I think I would definitely self-disclose, let them know, like, hey, I can personally resonate with what you are experiencing in this space. And I
Mhm.
think I would move forward to just try and validate their feelings. I feel like with this, it's very important to validate those feelings. Like, hey, I know that everyone is saying that I am this and I'm really successful and I'm so smart. But the issue that I've had in the past when disclosing this to other people is that them not validating that. I'll tell them, well, this is how I feel. Oh, well, that's not true. It's all in your head and blah blah blah. Like to validate all of that and let them know like, hey, that's a very valid feeling. I understand exactly how you feel, etc. And then move forward to kind of just try and hear more of, try and get to the root of it, trying to figure out what it is that has caused those imposter feelings for you. Because I feel like it is kind of, in a broad way, similar reason for everyone, but with everyone, there is usually a more specific situation or instance that has caused those feelings to really grow in how they have.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Love all of that. And so on one hand, I'm hearing like you being able to sort of like embrace them as they are, and then do some diving into the unique parts of their experience, because
Mhm.
you each have different, unique pathways to where you ended up, right? And how you got these, imposter feelings.
Mhm.
So love it. And that's the way, I mean, we're going to be doing supervision, we're going to be consultation, and this is some of what we'll talk about in these times, right? Is like, what is your approach? Does anyone else in the room have another approach? Learning from each other, challenging each other, validating as well.
Mhm.
And that allows you to then take a lot of this energy, not only what you're bringing, but what everyone in the practice is giving to you, to your clients. And I think that that's just incredibly important. It allows you to stay open to your clients. So this is hard work, and I know that it's hard sometimes. Like we want to also like pass it off. That's the imposter part too, like passing it off like, oh no, this is not hard. No, it is hard work, because you're taking on all this. Either there's similarities with you and your client that make it hard work, um, or the parts that don't sound familiar that can create a bit of a challenge. So yeah, short it, to the point. I really love that response and that approach.
And I think that that is what was so enticing to me about Wasabi and Well, is like
Mhm.
the emphasis on like the collaborative part. Like, we're getting supervision together, we're able to bounce ideas off each other, and like,
Mhm.
hey, what do you think about this? This is how I'm handling this. Do you have any better suggestions? That
Mhm.
for me kind of helped to neutralize those imposter feelings, because it lets me know that this is an environment that is safe for questions and help, and for me to be able to admit, hey, I'm a little confused, or hey, I'm not quite sure if I know how to handle this. Can I have some help? Which
Yes.
is, depending on, the kind of employment environment you have, is not always that for others. So
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah. Tell me about it. I feel like I've actually gotten pretty lucky myself in a lot of in training environments
mhm,
for therapy, but not so much in other places.
mhm.
Sorry, my daughter's waking up, and I just want to text my partner to make sure he knows, because she is very opinionated, and she'll come out here and try to tell us what to do, starting from young. All right. Let's see. Start time looking like okay, not too bad. So I would love it if you could talk a bit more about working with clients of color, and anything that comes to mind, whether it's an experience that, not just one experience, but like generally your experience of
Mhm,
working with clients of color, and maybe even problems and challenges
mhm,
that clients can, things that can bring you to therapy. Because I think that sometimes we're sitting in our space and we're like, oh, I don't think I need to talk to someone. Oh, I don't think that's a big deal. Speaking on the imposter part, right? Uh, but what kinds of things do people come to therapy to address?
what I've experienced most, especially with, brown and black population in terms of clients, it's a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. And though have not been lucky enough to have very many black and brown clients, the few that I do have, when we start to speak some more and we dig a little deeper, it seems like a lot of times some of those feelings that they are feeling are rooted in some, experiences from racial discrimination. And I suppose I would say one challenge that I have had is that even though we are both, the client and I may be both Black in this space and we understand each other, a lot of times, clients will come thinking, well, how can you help me fix this and fix that? But with that specific topic, even though I'm the therapist, like we are both experiencing the same thing as it relates to, that racial discrimination part. And, sometimes it's tough. It's like, well, wow, I really feel like I can't help them as much as I would like to because I am trying to navigate this just as they are.
Yeah.
But I do find that it's
Very
kind of
true.
helpful, like, hey, like admitting to them, like, hey, I know exactly how you feel.
Mhm.
And I'm trying just as hard as you are to navigate this, kind of feeling less alone. Because I find oftentimes that they'll come in thinking, well, I want you to help me fix this. But then they'll leave realizing, hey, it wasn't necessarily that I wanted this fixed. I just wanted to know that I wasn't alone in this feeling.
Love it. Yes. I love that. You're so right. You're so right that I think it's pretty common that there's this misconception of what our job is. It's
Mhm.
not to fix or give advice. Like we're not advice givers per se. Not to say we never give advice, but that's not our job, right? Because it would be pretty generic if we did that.
Mhm.
Um, so love that point that on in their experience in that time with you, even after one or two sessions, right? Like that's how fast it can happen, where they can realize, oh, there's more value than her fixing the world for me.
Mhm. Yes, fixing the
Yeah.
world. I guess a lot of them come to me hoping that I can help fix the world, but I look just like you. If I could, I would.
Yeah. And there's so many layers to that because even to that point of looking just like clients that look like us,
Mhm.
then we have our own unique experience. I mean, I think about um, navigating. I mean, I think about myself and the way I navigate the world in some areas that I have privileges that my client may not
Yes.
because of my education
Mhm.
level, my height. I mean, there's strange things that happen depending on how people perceive you.
Mhm.
And I think of colorism, which is something that's in Black and Brown communities all over the globe. So like my daughter, she's much lighter than me. I think when she navigates the world and her hair texture and all the things is just it's going to be a bit different for her than it was for me, right? Um, so yes, we look alike, yet not look alike. Yes, clients that look like us, but then there's also some of those gaps that we can't always relate to. So it
Yes.
is way more important that our clients understand that we're not fixing the world. We'll try our
Or,
best.
or in terms of, like how our experiences are different. Like, my parents are Haitian immigrants. Like it was like I was born and raised in America, but it was just different, if that makes sense. Like, depending on, where you're from in the diaspora, the experience is a
Mhm.
little bit different.
Oh, for sure. And generationally, the intergenerational piece that your parents' struggle is not your struggle. And doesn't mean you don't have them.
Mhm.
But I don't know if your parents are anything like for example, my dad loves to remind us about how many miles he had to
Oh,
walk
walk. Yes, how many miles they had to walk, whether it was to school or to the market and back. Yes,
farm at 4 a.m.
yes.
And all hard experiences that I'm proud to know and that I'm thankful for. But I cannot understand that. I just
Mhm.
didn't have to walk at 4 a.m. anywhere. He would never allow that.
So yeah, no, I
uh,
definitely understand.
yeah, yeah. And families from the Caribbean as well. So,
Oh,
so that, yeah, I mean, I definitely love, that's one thing I love about being in Florida is I feel like I get to treat more or work with more Caribbean people than I've ever had an opportunity to in the past. So,
yes, absolutely.
yeah. All right. So, it sounds like she kind of quieted down. Hopefully, she'll give me like 5 or 6 more minutes with you. um,
I know you said you feel like in Florida you're able to kind of like treat other people, I mean, people who are from the islands as well. Isn't it kind of similar in New York? Because I know it's like a melting pot up there and lots of Caribbeans up there too, I think.
yeah, there are, but it was like I didn't see them come through the door as much.
Okay,
Right.
understandable.
So yeah, I was, and maybe because of this was way pre-pandemic, so people actually came into the office for therapy, and they would come in on like their lunch breaks and things like that. But it could have been my location as well. I was like midtown, so that's where the practice was located. And so I don't know, maybe it was that I'm kind of not as familiar with New York as I probably should be. So
Mhm.
but here I get all like a diverse mix of
Especially
Caribbean
being
people.
based in Miami, because there's definitely like a smaller, I would say a smaller population of Caribbean people up here in Tallahassee. If there
Mm,
are, well, the Caribbean community that does exist up here is because of the colleges, not because like there are influx of community, I mean, Caribbeans living here.
right. And that's the only reason I was in Jacksonville for a year,
Mhm.
and straight from St. Thomas to Jacksonville, I did not last. It was too different. It was like too much of like a jump to go from my island to Jacksonville. It was
Mhm.
too different. But yeah, that was the only reason I was up there. I would have much preferred to have just come to Miami right
Mhm.
away, but that didn't happen. So I went all around the world first, and then finally came back to Miami. So all right. So I know that I mentioned before when we first started that I had a hunch that we see imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon differently,
Mhm.
and that I love that because from my standpoint, I actually try to discourage the use of the phrase or the term imposter syndrome, which is what most people in my like one-on-one with clients that they're using. Um, and discourage it because I dislike the I dislike the word imposter, but it's also because of how powerful words are. Like we can tell ourselves, like they say, don't shit on yourself.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, it doesn't feel like it's an affirming. Well, it's not affirming at all. And then I think of that, and when I hear imposter, memories that come to my mind are being followed in stores as a Black person being followed in stores, walking through the parking lot to your car and hearing people's doors lock.
Lock. Or they grab their purse. Yeah,
Like, I don't want your nasty purse.
at all.
You keep it. And I don't want your car. I'm walking to my car, right? And so I think of that, and I know I'm hyper focusing on the word imposter, but I challenge my clients to think of the how powerful words are and how they impact our brain. And over the years of working with clients, I've noticed a common thread around inner dialogue, which came up earlier, right? When you were saying, I'm telling myself, let me be lesser than before right? I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. That is the inner dialogue. And I worry that this imposter syndrome is something that is yet again built for the privileged people and not for us. So my different views. What are your thoughts?
I actually don't think we disagree because I completely agree with what you're saying, because I too am currently in a space in my life where I'm trying to be better about the things that I'm saying to myself, because I in the past, I've not been the greatest with that, just trying to get better about how I talk to myself, because I do agree that words have so much power.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like it carries energy. Like when I feel like the moment we start to put words out there, like little mini universes come together. Boom, boom, boom. And I mean, what is manifestation all about, right? It's all about like, I'm already there.
Mhm.
I'm just my presence trying to catch up with my future, right? Kind of thing. So uh, at the same time, because I also don't want to encourage black and white thinking as if something is all bad or all good, there is value in knowing that this experience exists,
Mm-hmm. But we
right? And
want to
so
give power to it by using those words often.
exactly. So from your perspective, uh, can why is it important for us to at least maintain this concept when we are working professionally, therapeutically with Black professional women? Why is it important to maintain the concept at least?
I it's interesting because even though I know a lot of times, like, it's just like people are not a fan of, having labels and stuff. I have had clients who have come in and are like, hey, they've got their psych eval, this is their diagnosis, and it's almost a sense of relief to have that label. So kind of similar to this. I
Mm,
think that we should not like give too much power to that word imposter, using it too much. But I think that it could be very helpful, if we have a Black professional woman coming in complaining of these things, and we're able to tell them, well, hey, it sounds like you may be experiencing some imposter phenomenon feelings. And I feel like at least having a name to go with it can really be helpful and kind of like take that weight off your shoulders. Because a lot of times it's like, wow, it's great to know that there is a reason for this, because I just felt like something was wrong with me.
right. Yes. Love it. That makes so much sense because then that means you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And no one ever, like, you don't ever want to get ill, but if you get ill, you definitely don't want it to be something that's rare because
Yeah.
then you're not getting better, right? So it's definitely way more comforting to
Mm-hmm.
to know, okay, I can Google this thing
Yes.
and I can start to understand it. Absolutely. That makes sense. I think it's more about it's that and then helping our clients to not tie themselves down to
Mm-hmm.
the narrative.
Yes.
Yeah, that narrative we can cut it at some slowly, right? We can get
Yes.
rid of it slowly. Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's just kind of like how they say there's power in knowledge. It's power in knowledge, knowing that, hey, this is what it is. There are other people who experience it. But now,
Mm-hmm.
what are we going to do to try and manage and move forward? They can find talks like this. There's now lots of research on it, especially, and like the research is growing on it as it relates to like Black and brown people, which is my favorite thing. Because before this, like I read a research paper about it, and like a imposter phenomenon was initially they had the sample was of white professional women, and there's many articles, there's like there is like a gap in the literature as it relates to IP, as it relates to, Black professional women. There's even articles specifically about IP and how it impacts Black college students, because it exists kind of in a similar way that it does in like the employment realm as it does in academia, especially once we enter into like grad school and up. Definitely difficult.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it seems then that we're in definitely inching towards better times with having, like you said, more knowledge out there, greater insight, and thankfully more people like yourself who are graduating their programs and um, becoming, trained, and then of course going on to being licensed. And I'm just so excited and for you, but also thankful that you're joining with us because part of the mission, of course, is one supporting you towards your goals, but it's making sure, trying to ensure that more of Black and brown clinicians are going out prepared
Mhm.
to do this work. And prepared isn't about the knowledge anymore, right? Because you're going to get that. Your confidence level and the boost, that's what's going to come with, you already have that knowledge to do this work. But for the business side, because that's where they do us a huge disservice in almost any wellness field. Right? They're like, here's this shiny certificate. Good luck, and they don't really prepare you to be independent in this work.
Mhm.
But you are gonna be able to serve more people if you can do this work independently from an entrepreneur standpoint, to have for access, right? Like we are trying to address access to healing and wellness. And so that's definitely the additional part of this mission. And so why we are here talking about imposter phenomenon, and also diving into other concepts like inner dialogue, which is one of my favorite. That and self-honesty is my passion project.
The dialogue. I'm definitely gonna look more into that. Now I'm interested.
Yeah, that's we have a did I record that one? I can't remember if we recorded that one, but Victoria and I have had a few. Victoria is also another intern at What's Being Well, and we talked a bit about inner dialogue. I think it was on IG. This is before I was doing Zoom and YouTube. So maybe Victoria and I are due for another inner dialogue. You can join in and we can have a big old
Definitely.
discussion on it. Yeah.
Interested in that. Just from what you've said a bit about it, I definitely want to do some more research on that and see what everyone else has to say about it.
Yeah, yeah. You'll hear me talking about it all the time. Listen, research, but you're gonna get it from me.
Yes, and I'm definitely excited about that. That's why, I jumped at the opportunity to be able to be trained by someone who looks similar like to me and has similar life experiences. Definitely excited.
Yeah, awesome. Well, this was fun. Love it. Love this topic and love your energy. And looking forward to us getting to our onboarding and having you get started with us. Woo!
Yes, so excited.
Yeah, we talked with Leandra tomorrow. So we're talking about parasocial relationships.
Parasocial. I think I've heard about that. Definitely would like to talk
I'm
about that.
I'm pretty ignorant to it and on purpose because when she told me the topic, I read like 2 lines and I was like, I'm gonna stay ignorant to it because I want her to like
Introduce it to you.
let us have it. Yeah. So if you want to join us tomorrow and listen in, certainly you can. And anyone else who might be watching this, whether it's now or in the future, please feel free to jump on in with us tomorrow. But thank you so much, Lovely, for joining me today. And this was great. We'll chat again soon.
It was my pleasure, Dr. Wilcher. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Bye.